Chicago looking for maple trees so they could make more yo-yos. And they put an ad in the paper, on the local papers here. I believe it was Urban Olson, if I get the name right, answered that he had maple, and then several others did too. So ultimately, they moved here to this area to have the closer source of maple, and so they could make their yo-yos. And then my dad came up. I have to think, well, we moved up in 46, but I won't get into any more deal. I've got a lot of other things.
You're 30 big films.
Yeah, my dad, and you said that, was my dad did make, or take the pictures with a 16mm camera. And like you mentioned, we have the big reel at home, and it's in a metal case. So they're talking about me. Yeah, from the start of the factory, which I'm sure this, digging the footings. So we do have that.
Wonderful.
So it's in good shape. So I'll let somebody. So
can we have permission to sell copies of it?
Oh, I don't know how that works.
Actually, we have some copies back there, and we had them transcribed to a DVD, and so far we haven't sold any. We've given some away, so we're not. We were going to ask you if that was all right.
Well, I don't know how
You
that.
have to get royalties.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, we'll negotiate that afterwards.
Yeah, because we gave a copy to the school.
Okay.
When the school had one of the reunions, maybe it was a 75-year reunion. I think that was maybe the last one. We gave a copy to the school, so ultimately that's maybe how the other copies got out there.
So also some of the memorabilia that's here as well, I think is pretty impressive. And again, part of that was here that would go around on some of those. Here we've got somebody back here with the.
The Smothers Brothers were famous after the yo-yo plant left life.
Yeah.
Okay.
When Donald Duncan started was Playmats, and then they worked with Playmats. Donald Duncan still was
sold
his
the Duncan
company.
name, so he called it Playmax.
Okay.
Now they're the leading producer of yo-yos.
So we've already got a controversy, and it's been 51 years.
Well, that's also what broke the company pretty much.
Yeah. The lawyers, and I've heard there was controversy on that about using the term yo-yo. Is that part of it?
Right, they said it was a generic term. You couldn't, use it, just solely use that. But we talked to Donald Duncan when he started his Playmats company in Tucson, Arizona. We visited him. He told us that that judge, if they tried to work with that judge, and he said we could have pulled ourselves out because we had a lot of orders, and the judge wouldn't let them. He blamed the judge and the lawyers. He told us that.
That's the first time I've ever heard a lawyer blamed for anything. That sounds familiar, though. And also, that they changed that marketing strategy and didn't do the demonstrations, didn't go around as much, and there was hints that may have lent itself to it. Yeah.
Because once he started Playmats, they did do a lot of demonstrating. On that table is an article from the Dell's Visitor out of Taylor's Falls, Minnesota, which is from 2001. It's a good article there. You might all want to read that before you leave, because Donald Duncan was interviewed in that article. Talked a lot about what happened.
Now, if we can, let's talk about a few of the, if we can, of some of the good stories that came out of there. Were there any marriages or weddings that may have anybody here who met their future Mr. and Mrs. at the plant working there that they'll admit to?
Well, I hate to do all the talking, but my uncle Elif married Lucy Peterson, and they both worked there.
Okay. And then, so were there any first babies named Duncan or anything along the line? Or?
No babies in that marriage.
What about clubs? Because I see there are some photos here about softball clubs. Were there other clubs or anybody that played on the softball team? Here's back here. Now, you've actually got one of the shirts. Can you show up?
These guys were the team. These are the team members.
This is the team members of the softball?
Yeah, the softball.
Okay.
And
Okay.
Ann Osling was one of our main.
Those guys were better than I was, but I still played.
Oh, so you were the cleanup hitters, huh? All right, good.
They were good country girls.
They were good. So, and I mean,
And this
one of the times was ahead of its time, wasn't it? I mean, to have softball teams from home? No? Okay.
And this is my daughter, and I no longer could get into my shirt, so she came to wear it. I have the uniform.
She's, all right, yeah, look at this. Yeah.
Stay there, that's a great job.
gonna let the competition actually take this photo. And do her name on there. Oh, okay. Great. You were a good athlete. So, and did you have sponsorship from Duncan? Did they help you out with this? They did.
They bought our shirts and our gloves and our balls. Bats too, I guess.
Wow.
Parents were managers.
Parents were managers as well. Now, one of the things that I did hear, and I can't remember where she said, talked about her mother, who her aunt worked there and lost a finger. Where does she go? Oh, yeah. Tell me this story.
My Aunt Millie works she used to bring home different samples of that. But she lost part of her finger on a drill press for it.
Oh, so it's not that she was just that enthusiastic with her yo-yoing. That's good to know. But was that common? I mean, or injuries common? It sounds like, I mean, probably for its day. I mean, we see some of the activities and such on the assembly process. It looks like, was it fairly dangerous? I mean, you'll have to let me know. It wasn't dangerous? No? This is Gladys. Tell me, what did you do there?
I ran the kickers and put the diamonds, set the diamonds in the yo-yos. And when I left there, I got married and they gave me took up a collection. Here's the name of all the ladies that were working there in '53.
Look at that. That's great. So, and this is typed onto a card with 3 or 4 pages of type names of folks who contributed.
I think the ladies,
The ladies. That's fantastic.
I just found it last night. I was looking for something else.
Well, the worst part, there was a check in there too that's been waiting for. They've been waiting on that one for 61 years now, I think. So, but it sounds like, I mean, there were definitely some good times that came out of this. So, like kind of a fraternity sorority atmosphere in some ways, huh? I mean, a real friendship.
Yeah, we did. We had good friends. Yep. And I think they were all gone now, but I was about the youngest. I came right out of high school.
What about any other good stories of? Oh, yes.
I'll stand.
You just stand. Oh, you're just going to show how short I am, aren't you?
Yeah, right. Most of you know who I am, but my name is Dennis Franzen, and I was born 2 blocks up the street here, right across from the bank. And I want to tell you a couple of stories about Duncan Yo-Yo. First of all, my mother worked at Duncan Yo-Yo in the late 40s and 50s. And at that time, my dad was kind of upset about her going to work because he thought that women shouldn't have to go out and work to help make a living. Well, in her case, she wanted some extra money and she loved the people she worked with. And some of you know her and some of you don't. And so anyway, he finally gave up, and so she worked at the yo-yo factory. She was on What's My Line, and I have an extra copy here. I've got several. So if somebody would like this, that don't have one, they can have it. I've made some extra copies of her being on What's My Line. Because they tried to figure out what her job was, and her job was tying yo-yo strings. They couldn't figure it out. So a little bit about myself. When I graduated from Frederick High School in 1951, my dad, born on a dairy farm here, 10 miles out in the country, and of course, all I knew how to do was milk cows and run a chainsaw. So he said to me, you know, you've got to go to the Twin Cities and get a good job. He said, you know, we didn't even talk about going to college. And I went down to the Twin Cities with another fellow from Frederick, and we slept in a car down by Dunwoody and went around and looked for a job. And went over to 3M and went over there and got hired. And they wanted me to come to work on Monday, and that was the week before. And of course I went home and they gave me a book what they're going to pay me and do whatever. And went home and looked at it, and of course I was half scared about being in the Twin Cities. And I went home and I looked at it and I said, you know, they aren't going to pay me enough to hardly get by. So I decided I was going to stay home and cut wood on my dad's farm. And it turned out that he had a lot of hard maple trees on the farm. And so I hired Max Lind and one other guy with a two-man maul chainsaw, some of you know what they're like. And we cut down some hard maple trees, 8 foot long. We had horses, and so I took one of the horses from the farm, and I dragged the logs out of the woods into the field. And those of you probably remember Shorty Aubert at Frederick, Wisconsin. He came with his truck, and we hauled the logs to Oscar Foltz's one-man sawmill. And I went up and helped Oscar saw 2 5/8 by 2 5/8 hard maple squares, 8 foot long. And we loaded them on a truck by hand, hauled them into the yo-yo factory here. And if most of you know Paul Billy, he was the guy that graded the logs and lumber. And it turned out that and my mother wanted to charge me $10 a week to stay at home and wash my clothes and feed me and do whatever. But coming in, cutting those logs and the lumber and taking them into the yo-yo factory, they were paying a great price for hard maple squares. It come to about $110 a thousand. Well, needless to say, my overhead was really low, and I made a heck of a lot more cutting yo-yo squares than I'd ever go to the Twin Cities to work. And so I cut all the hard maple trees off my dad's farm, turned them into yo-yos, and started my business career. And I was 17 years old in 1951. And some of you know the rest of the story, but anyway, I went over to the neighbor and made a deal with him to cut some timber, hard maple trees out of his farm and other logs. And that worked out well, and I hired my first employee when I was 18. And so if it wouldn't have been for Duncan Yo-Yo being here at Luck, Wisconsin, I probably wouldn't be here today. So anyway.
Is that $10 a week offer still? that's a pretty appealing number there, but it also shows. I mean, and maybe you can help me, Dennis. But were there quite a few young folks that worked there at the time? Was that common that were involved somehow with the operation? Yeah.
Oh yeah, a lot of these people. There's a lot of different people working at the yo-yo factory. It's a big deal at that time.
I mean, but they were pretty young. I mean, it would.
I don't know that as a
Okay.
fact, really.
Okay.
So I know I brought a lot of 2 5/8 by 2 5/8 8-foot squares in, and I got paid very well for it. So anyway, that was the start.
Well, that's good to know. Yeah.
Those yo-yo squares, they had a good byproduct too, because the ends, it worked wonderful in the fish house. You get a couple gunny sacks of those maple, and it lasts you all winter.
Yeah.
For heat.
Oh, for heat. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, heat the fish house.
I mean, I've been hungry, but I didn't know about it.
Well, it wasn't good about LP
Yeah.
in those days, and
Sure.
expensive, but they worked really good.
The tailings. Now, was there... actually, Tam Howie's got a kind of a neat story from after the plant left.
Yeah. I guess I want to comment a little bit about the museum and the library too, a little bit about the people that don't know, but why we have a dome on that library and museum was because of Duncan or the yo-yo itself. Also the wigwam, but that was one of the reasons why we put the round dome on our library. Back when we dedicated the library and museum, one of my friends from Ellsworth, Wisconsin had talked about being in Vietnam, and there wasn't hardly any toys for any of the kids in Vietnam. And he and his buddy had hunted out by Cushing all those years, and they knew about Duncan Yo-Yo. And they wrote a letter to Duncan Yo-Yo, I think in 1966 or 67, asking him if they would donate any yo-yos. And Duncan Yo-Yos sent, at that time, 10,000 yo-yos to Vietnam. And they were distributed to all the kids around Vietnam. So it was a pretty neat story about Luck, Wisconsin, and how that was dedicated. And the article was written in Stars and Stripes at that time. This Bill Harding has passed away now, my friend, in 2010. He didn't get credit for giving the yo-yos to Vietnam. A general had intercepted the yo-yos on the way in and distributed the yo-yos. But he thought a lot of that idea and of our area, and it was a great story, I thought.
What about, I'd like to hear if some of you were pretty good with a yo-yo yourself. I've seen a few folks back there practicing a little bit or showing some of their skills. Were there any folks who, I mean, did they let you do yo-yo practicing at the facility? I mean, did they encourage that? Were there any like trick, did anybody have any tricks that they kind of passed along or anything? Were any of you very good with the yo-yo? Just because you worked there, was it assumed you would? Yep.
I was not very good with the yo-yo, but Jerry Vidine, who was in my class, we graduated in '56 from Luck. He quit school, went all over the world, or maybe all over the United States, demonstrating yo-yos for Duncan. And Jerry just passed away in this last year or so. But his son works as the meat manager at Dick's Dick's store in Osceola.
Mm-hmm.
So, but Jerry did that and was just really good at it.
What about some of the stories after Duncan? How many folks moved from the area after this closed? Were there, can a show of hands, any of that moved out after the closure? You did. Okay. So, where did you go?
Well, I went to the cities to work. I had lived with my parents. My dad was Bill Coble, Mary Helen and Bill Coble, and Dad was the manager over here back in 60-something. And they moved to Ladysmith, and then I went to the city.
So, and did anybody stay in the industry? I mean, did you find that did it help you in that job market? Did you find anything related after that?
The only job I did over there was getting tours to Boy Scouts and people that came over to see how yo-yo was made. My dad stayed in the wood industry. He worked for Cycle Toy for a while. Stanley Judd. Well, anyway. But as far as no, he was in wood before he came here, and he stayed in wood. So.
Well, and maybe that brings up another point here: all the different aspects of yo-yo production, and being a relative rookie. Raise your hand if you want to explain what you did.
Say, come over here. We're going to start with this. My neighbor Marlis from over by Cushing claims she didn't really. She claims she didn't really work for Duncan, but tell us what you did for Duncan and how much you made.
Oh, I wound string around the little red buttons, so I donated a button to the museum. I don't know what I made, but a few dollars for
and how many?
I don't know.
Did any of the rest of you do strings or something at home? So tell us about it.
Is that it, Marlis?
I'm Judy Brendel, and I was a farm lady, and I was going to make my fortune doing this. And I also had 3 friends who went in, and I walked into the store, and they gave me a bunch of strings. They said, hold out your arm. And they filled it up in my arm. I could hardly lift it. And a grocery bag full of these little squares, you had to wind it around. And they said, come back tomorrow with them. I had my whole family doing them all night, I think, and didn't even make a dent in them. Got back the next morning and said, oh, we're sorry, we gave you about 10 times too much. I never made my fortune either. It was an experience. Don't remember how much we made. It was so much a pound.
What about the actual harvesting? Oh, here, we got, what did you do?
I did the string, the same thing as they did. Yeah.
Where did the string come from? I mean, was the string, I'm imagining those giant Darwin, Minnesota rolls that are 10 feet tall, but my guess is it came in, it was done somewhere else and then done here? Is that a good assumption?
Could be. Sounds good.
It's yeah. So you did that, and what else? Who else was involved with kind of the harvesting? We heard from Dennis. Were there others involved with kind of the harvesting from the local? I mean, I would think that we tap out the local maple supply pretty well. No, there was still quite a bit more. I mean, it wasn't like we didn't completely eliminate it or anything. Do we know about the volume? I mean, how much were they using? Quite a bit. No. Anybody?
interesting, I mean, what they say is that with piecework, a lot of it you got paid by the piece, right? I didn't work there, these guys did.
Okay.
I thought that was interesting.
You got paid by the piece?
We run baggers. Yeah.
Let's say it again. You ran what?
Baggers.
Explain what that is.
Oh, it was a plastic,
The yo-yos,
the yo-yos.
the yo-yos were on cards, and then we put them in a plastic casing, and the bagger cut it off.
Okay, okay.
And see,
Larry Scow kept us supplied with the plastic in the road.
Okay.
And then that covered the yo-yos went on and covered the cards, and they went down into the box below, and he had to keep that box out of there, and yo-yos dumped up here, and the plastics on the rollers. So we kept him on that.
You kept him busy.
They had to
Yes.
make sure they sealed.
But
Well, what's-
he looks real good.
He looks so good. Is this Larry Scow talking?
Yeah.
Oh, he does. Where is he?
That green shirt.
Oh, there he is. Yeah, yeah. Larry, tell us what you're an essential element to this operation. It sounds like, huh?
I've been there 3.5 years.
Yeah.
I worked out front with all gals
Okay.
and Devil's Clyde, stuff like that.
And the legend grew from there, huh? Somebody else raising their hand here. Yes,
I
Claire.
worked on the baggers house, so I put the yo-yo in the machine, the bags, and cut them off.
Well, is there an estimate as to what the timeline, what would it take to go from a chunk of wood to a bagged yo-yo for retail? How long would that be? Would that, in one day? Would it happen in a day? No?
Because the lumber had to be dry killed.
Okay.
And that takes a while to do that. Probably 6 months in total from the tree to the customer.
And then, who was the last? Was there quality control along the way? Was there somebody who said, "No, this one's not going to make it"? I wonder, was every yo-yo tested?
Pickup load and back, old ones that were really good.
Oh, did you? So they were rejects. Oh,
There were seconds.
there were seconds.
Yeah, that's how they used to give out tours to the kids.
You give of seconds.
Yeah.
So you had all of these kids blown away and impressed by this elaborate yo-yo operation. Then you give them a faulty yo-yo when it was all done.
Well, they worked. I don't know, I didn't try it.
That's why they never got any good. All right, thanks.
School was full of them. It was dangerous walking down the hallways.
I bet.
There were yo-yos going in every direction.
Well, and so who had some other jobs involved with this? Raise your hand if you had one that we haven't really talked about. It would be interesting. Jerry, what did you do? There.
I just worked there.
Well, was it common to have people change positions? I mean, was there a pecking order? Did you work your way up, sort of thing?
Well, I worked in the mill room and not out with the women like Larry did. Out with the lathes, the turning lathes, and bringing well, I helped Paul Billy with the drying process too.
Mm-hmm.
We could dry, I think like 120,000 feet of lumber every 3 weeks. And when they were busy with over 600 people working there, we ran out of lumber before the 3 weeks were up. And they used to have to buy carloads from New York of dried hardwood pulp.
Yeah. Oh. So when would that have been then?
That was in the 60s when the big boom was.
Okay.
And as far as like you're talking about, if they checked every yo-yo, well, when they turned them on the lathes, every machine had a gauge, a go or no-go gauge that they had to be the proper size or be adjusted.
And did you ever change that? I mean, anybody ever screw with that just to maybe get some good firewood the next day, or?
Not necessarily, but it happened anyway.
Okay.
No, it would happen that they didn't always work, but.
It sounds like though that, I mean, so there had to be quite a few different stages of what the assembly was along the way. I mean, there are different aspects to it. Were there parts that would get pretty far behind? What would they do? Would they just sit around and play yo-yo for a while? Or were there parts that fell behind, or that, I mean, that maybe?
I think like when when the biggest boom was, everybody was always behind. I mean, like when it worked 24 hours a day and there, you know, you made however many yo-yos you could in that time, and they never had to stop, you know, never had to stop and wait for the orders to catch up.
So there was a time when it was literally running around the clock. Is that what you're hearing? Oh, okay.
Just getting back to the tying the strings.
Yeah.
Well, they had spent a lot of money with engineers trying to get a machine that could tie the strings.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't successful at it. They just couldn't quite get it. There was one guy come up with the idea. I think he used it. I don't know if you're familiar with the hay baler. Well, the baler, it's got that, and it makes the knot and ties the bale. And it worked really well. And the thing is, that's about the time that it went out of business. So I didn't make this, but, you know, it just common sense kind of overdid engineering.
Sure.
He had it perfected pretty well. That old hay baler.
That's great.
Jim, you should talk about my dad's brother, Felix, he's the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
Anyway, he made this machine, talking about tying the bales. And he had these little fingers, and he actually made it tie the strings. And he wanted to sell it to Duncan. Duncan wouldn't pay him what he wanted, so he tore it apart. He was that kind of a guy. He did something, and he was pretty sharp, but if you didn't go along with him, it was done. But he actually perfected them. Duncan wouldn't pay him.
That'll show him, huh?
Yeah. He actually made a lot of the machines.
Yeah. Oh, Elif, that was my dad's twin
Elif,
brother, yeah. Now, there again, this is the article here. Like I say, everybody should read this, but only one colleague. Dal was a visitor. Dal's visitor. It says here about Elif, his twin brother Elif also came from Chicago, was hired as a machinist and maintenance foreman. So that's what Elif, his twin brother, did. And they looked quite a bit alike, and people would get them mixed up, so I guess it caused a little problem once in a while.
Well, they look quite
a bit. But somebody asked me once, they said, do they swear alike? Because I guess they used to swear quite a bit. I didn't know he didn't swear at all. But anyway, this is very good. This is a great article here. Can I just read you something else about my dad here? Because my dad never gets enough credit, I don't think. It says, Duncan's first top, or yo-yo model, was crafted by Gus Osling, a master craftsman in wood who was then working for Barley Brothers, a woodworking firm in Chicago. Duncan hired Osling as production sword in response to a massive promotion campaign. After the war in '46, still plagued by labor and transportation problems, Duncan responded to an advertisement in a Chicago newspaper for the sale of hard maple by Urban Olson, a Luck lumberman. And he said that Duncan reached an agreement with that Olson's lumber, which would be dried in his kiln, located close to the railroad tracks in Luck, would be shipped to Duncan's Chicago plant. When that deal fell through, Duncan ended up with the kiln. Because the kiln was located in an area rich with hard maple, he decided to move his plant to the conservative, strongly Danish community of Luck. So
Conservative, strongly Danish. I don't know if that sounds like a selling point, but we'll see. So that was, and with that as well, I mean, just the location being by the rail line and around the maple, it sounds like the location really did have a lot to do with why it was here, or just the facilities here as well.
Greg?
Yes.
My grandfather, Einar Peterson, was one of the lumbermen. Einar Peterson was one of the lumbermen. He had the farm on the south end of Main Street. And this is what he wrote. He said that during the operation of the factory, he supplied about 660 truckloads of yo-yo squares, which amounted to about 1,500,000 feet. But before they had the kiln here, he was contacted by Duncan. And this is what he wrote. The manager of Duncan's came up with the idea that a kiln be built in one of the towns, which was handiest. I was told that I could choose the site, either Grantsburg, Luck, or Milltown. It was taken up by the Milltown businessmen who did not seem to be interested. Grantsburg was out of the question as far as I was concerned. So it was decided that the company take over my lease on a railroad loading site, which I had leased in Luck. So Einar had a little sawmill on the farm just west of the tracks, and he had a railroad lease, and so that's where the kiln was built. And then it turned out, well, it made a lot of sense to build the factory by the kiln.
Now, what about, I know there were other jobs that involved that maybe we haven't heard much about, but what about some of the kind of ancillary and second? That's a different story, I don't know.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. See, it took 50 years to admit it, but, no, were there, tell me, Carl, how were you involved at all?
No, nothing.
Yeah, but, I mean, was it something you were, I mean, became known for, I guess, in some ways, kind of everybody was involved with.
They wanted kids to work down there, but I went home and asked my parents, no, you gotta milk cows.
Oh. So that was considered kind of a prestigious job if you were a young man.
Yep.
Yeah. And how come Larry was the only one that got that? He was the only one that got to work with all the women, huh?
Well, he was better looking, of course.
Robert, were you involved at all?
No.
Not at all? But, I mean, there had to be, you probably knew a lot of people that worked there or were involved somehow, right?
Sure.
I mean, at the time, and tell me, I mean, I would think if you went somewhere and said you were from Luck, did people automatically know about yo-yos? Did they know that? Was there, they didn't? I mean, did you have to kind of tell them about it, or, is it, yes?
It was well known. When I was in the service, that was one thing. Oh, you're that guy from that yo-yo town. And a couple other things I think is kind of interesting. Elof built the first ice auger that I ever saw in this town.
He did, actually.
Yeah. And he drilled all the holes for the winter carnival out here. And people came around just to watch him drill holes.
Another story, he wasn't a good marketing guy, you know.
No.
I mean, he was as bad as you get, but he had a real mechanical mind.
Okay.
And he made this ice auger when there wasn't many around. You know,
There weren't any.
Huh?
That was the first
There weren't any.
Centrifugal clutch header, you know, where you had and worked good. Well, a little bit naive and trusted people too much, so word kind of got around. That guy, man, he's got something that really drill holes. So this guy comes up to the door one Friday night, you know, and he says, I heard you got ice auger here. He says, you know, we'd like to pay us so much and rent that for the weekend. Well, he let him have it, take it. But Monday morning, of course, they brought it back. Well, here it was, these people. He had it patented, everything. I forget who the assemblyman was. It Okonski back then?
Could be.
Mr. Newholm, was it Okonski back then?
Yeah.
Okonski was the congressman.
Congressman, I meant, yeah. Well, anyway, he got this patent and everything. Well, all you had to do was change it a little bit, you know. And it turned out these people, they were guys out of the Twin Cities, you know. I should, you know, because it was legal, but he didn't tell me he was going to get all the workings of that thing and study it all. But that's really where it got going after that.
Yeah.
So
he didn't make any money because of that.
He didn't know how to market and stuff
Okay.
like that, you know.
So in some ways, the yo-yo plant around here led to a lot of weekends being wasted out on the ice out here, it sounds like. Yeah.
Big Butternut was one of the best walleye lakes around when I lived in Luck, or we lived in Luck. I don't know if there's any walleye left there, but there were a lot of them in those days.
And Gus went on to become quite an arrow maker.
An arrow maker?
Oh gosh, we shot bows behind his house many times. He'd give you a match set of arrows, and he showed us how it did it. It was a big deal.
Wow.
I think that's all he did in the leather.
Before compound bows by many years.
Doesn't his son work with him too?
Yeah.
Yeah, they started that. And they were going to go into compound bows. My dad fell and broke his, or whatever, got hurt, and he couldn't work anymore, so they never got into compound bows.
But that would have probably gone the same as his brother's ice auger. They weren't good marketing people, they were good mechanics. But.
So there was some real innovation coming out of this area at the time because of that in some ways, it sounds like. What about within the facility? Were there, I mean, was it a pretty friendly place to live? I mean, we saw the birthday card there, but did have casual Friday kind of attitudes? Were the potlucks or anything? Were there any parties that people will admit to? Any lampshades that they're embarrassed to have worn? You never saw any fights?
Never saw anybody get in a fight, so it's been fairly fun.
Was it a lucrative place to work? I mean, was there a waiting list to get on the floor to actually be working there, or did they have a tough time finding workers, or did they have enough around here?
I have a question with that. I consider that the reason we moved to the cities is that the Duncan Yo-Yo factory went out of business. Now, what I remember and what is actually true might be two different things. Because the way I remember was Land O'Lakes here yet. We were in the entertainment business. We had the Deluxe Theater and the Teen Club in Milltown. And when the Yo-Yo factory went out of business, the way my little brain said is, oh, people don't have money for bread and butter, and so they don't have money to go to the movies, and so we lost the farm and we moved to the cities. Is that right, Mom?
That's right.
So was Land O'Lakes not here yet? Had that not come to town?
Oh, that was here before that.
So pretty much in luck, if you didn't work at the Yo-Yo factory, you worked at the creamery?
It was a dry clean.
It was really a farming area.
Mostly farms. Okay.
Now, Marilyn, what did you do there? Were you involved? Were you involved at all? She ran everything else. You were the one that kept them upright on the weekends, huh?
Entertained.
Yeah, that's what I did. I entertained them on weekends.
But I mean, it sounds like, because as she mentioned here, this was kind of an essential operation, and when it folded up, there were a lot of the whole industry and the whole area changed. Because you could tell that, though, right?
People couldn't buy eggs, let alone pay 25 cents to go to the movies. So that was the end of the movies.
You were really overcharging.
I think I watched The Incredible Mr. Limpets like 146 times.
I'm not. Yes?
When Duncan Jr. got married, they lived out, had a lake home, and they invited us all out for a picnic barbecue after work one night. It was lovely.
Okay. So there was mingling from the around the staff? I mean, was there?
Donald Sr., then the Junior took it over.
Okay.
And then when he got married and lived out there, they invited us all out for supper, barbecue. It was lovely.
Was that something like that common? Or was that, I mean, was there a lot of...
We had potlucks, but not, I mean, they didn't invite us like that one. That was a big deal.
Okay.
But otherwise, they were very nice to us.
Now, was there anybody that stayed in a related industry after the fact, after this? I mean, was there anything left? What happened? What was it? Literally boarded up and sold? I think it was the facility was pretty much sold in '65, wasn't it? After that,
You went into the hands of the receivers?
the bankruptcy court. Okay. Just well,
There's some.
yeah.
To get enough help, and I was not working at the time, and I got a phone call from one of the fellows in the office that I happened to know, and he said, could you come and help us out? And I didn't really want to go, so I said no, and then he said, well, if you will come and help us during this rush, we'll see if we can get you a job in the office. And so I thought, well, okay, I'll try it. And I get over there and they say, my job is going to be floor lady. Well, what do I know? I had never been home. My kids worked there, but I didn't know anything. And I got the job of going around and checking to see that the strings were the right length. The women sat at tables and tied, wound their yo-yos.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to check at random to see that they were the right length. And I could sense the resentment. There's pretty keen competition on piecework over there. And they were not happy with me getting that job. And so one day, one lady said to me, how'd you get that job? You haven't got any experience. We've been working here for years. We know all about it. What qualifications do you have? And I said, I don't have any. They told me I had to take this job because they were so busy, and I'm here. But I said, I just have one qualification. This is the embarrassing part that I don't know if I should tell her.
You're far past that. Don't worry.
Anyway, I said, I only have one qualification. I said, it just so happens that my belly button is 42 inches from the floor, and that's the length the strings have to be. I hold the string here. When it hits the floor, then you're in business.
So that's that. I think, Americans with Disabilities Act might frown on that. That's pretty good. How did you find that out? I'm going to ask that. How did you realize that? That amazing statistic.
I don't remember all that. It wasn't true, but I just made it up.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
They did strings up in the woolen mill in Frederick too.
Oh, they did. Okay. So there were other, and I heard that they also, is that where they did the plastic ones as well later?
I just know strings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jesus strings. What about anybody else have any physical attributes that help you on the job? Yes.
Someone mentioned the chicken coop. Who mentioned the chicken coop?
Your chicken coop story.
Right.
And they were.
Johnson's had the big chicken factory here in lot too. Oh, that factory, they raised them and butchered them and sold and stuff. And that was, where Jensen's furniture is, and then it was where that new building they built, it was across the road from them. And it was a big thing way back then.
So there were chickens, right? Or chickens or turkeys? Or it was
I think they raised them.
raised turkeys. Okay.
They shipped them out, and it was a big deal.
It was a hamstring.
What did it have to do?
After Johnson's moved out, they rented the building to Duncan so they could go they had some work up there. I'm sorry.
Yep.
A little story related to her dad. He worked in the mill room in the woodwork. He would see the maple first. Of course, if people are in the woodwork, that. So bird's eye maple doesn't come from the maple, so it's tiger tail maple. But he would take all the bird's eye out, and he would make furniture out of it.
Oh.
If you see bird's eye. Well, nowadays it's mostly veneer, but that was solid. He was solid wood, bird's eye maple. We still have some of that bird's eye maple.
So but that never made it into the yo-yos then. That was too good for that.
Yeah, it's very rare. You
Sure.
sit there.
Was there, and how many of you did something, work somehow with the wood? Wood aspect. Raise your hands if you did something with the wood. Whether it was the lathe or even, like Dennis said, kind of the beginnings of the supply. Was there, were there any woodworkers that came out of this? Was it, were there skills that, other than how high your belly button was, were there skills that may have led to this? Did they look for people who would do certain aspects? Were there any specific jobs that were kind of lent themselves to the industry that you can think of? You're never going to live that down. You realize that. That's gonna. You're lucky this came out this late after the fact, or there probably would have been a nickname associated with it. What were some other jobs that people did there? Because I would guess that did you do more than one job? Were there people that did more than one thing, more than aspect? Oh, what was that?
You never got paid either.
You never what's that?
Oh, yeah, well, you did a lot of jobs. I mean, you're supposed to be able to, if you were, say, a foreman on a shift or something, you had to be able to handle all the jobs.
Sure.
I mean, from cutting the yo-yo sticks to doweling them to running the lathes to fixing the lathes, you had to do everything. But I was just wondering to ask if there's anybody, it seems to me that they used the old woolen mill building up in Frederick at one time for something, but I don't remember what it was. Maybe somebody else does.
Well, they run it, they assembled stuff up there too.
They did?
Yeah, they did. They run it 3 shifts around the clock, 7 days a week, same as the the Terry Johnson building for a period of time when it was really going.
Okay.
And a lot of these guys, Marty worked in one of them, and you know, supplied things, supplied for everybody.
Sure.
So they assembled a lot of the. I think they did a lot of plastic stuff way up there, the woolen movement.
Yeah, the plastics were
Yeah, the plastics were coming in then. The 400 imperial plastic they made there. You know. I mean, they brought the supplies in
Right.
together there.
Was there, did the employees get kind of a sneak peek at the future ever on new models or anything? Did they ever, was that kind of a big deal to have a new model come out?
They just showed up there.
They just showed up?
So ask about when the butterfly yo-yo started.
That was a big deal, I thought, wasn't it? When it had a big change.
I guess I don't remember when it started.
They made tops too, of course.
You made tops. You see some of the tops that over here. There's
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They used to go out, even the Indian reservation was in on it. We used to go out there and pick up a truckload of, you know, wrapped string and tops, and the yo-yo string was put in bags, I think, is the way it was. I think what's wrapped that way, I think, was for spin tops. Is what I remember. But yeah, they were employed too for a while.
Wow. So is there an estimate? What it's busiest? How many people worked at the facility? Do we know?
This article said from 500 to 600 and some people at
Yeah,
the top.
it was over 600.
It was
really
over
going.
600 and something.
And that's direct Duncan employees, probably, right?
Right. No, my dad said at one time there was going to be an article about the yo-yo factory in the Look magazine. And of course, a lot of younger people don't remember the Look. It never did get in. I don't think it ever got in that magazine.
Okay.
But that was at the peak time. They were supposed to go in that magazine.
Yeah, it seems there was like 630 positives, the number that comes to mind. And that was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week that it run them.
Worked 14 days and had one off.
14 days and one off.
13 days was all you want.
13 and one off.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that one day off was probably spent just sleeping.
Jerry used to work one shift, and then one shift off, and then one shift
In the
on.
maintenance part, yeah, so everybody could get a day off. There was one time I went to work like 7 in the morning until 3:30 in the afternoon. Went home and had a nap, come back to work at 11 at night till 7 in the morning. Went home and have a nap, come back at 3:30 and work till midnight again.
Wow.
Just so that you could double up, so you didn't get an extra day that way. You know, you couldn't work more than 13 days in a row, and you had to double up like that so that everybody could have their 14th day off.
Oh, okay.
To be legal.
So you were working the system back then, huh? Good to see you.
And did you get paid when it closed up?
Not entirely. I never did get all my pay, or my vacation pay or whatever, when they closed up. You know how that works? The taxes come out first, and then the lawyers get their cut next. Because then if they leave any, then you get to divide it up amongst the employees.
Sure.
They usually don't leave any.
They have a tendency to find a use for all of it, don't they? Yeah. But
Speaking
yes.
of what Jerry just said in this article, there again talks about the companies that had problems after Duncan went bankrupt. They were printers and all the companies that did things for him, they never got their money either. So like I said, if you got time, you should read this. It's very interesting.
So my guess though, with 600 plus employees proper, they were probably close to that in just kind of the support industries that were kind of making their livings off the Duncan employees. I mean, it would make sense that there was a pretty good.
Yeah, pretty everybody around the country that was available was working there right at that time. Yeah.
Plus all the other people involved in it, yeah. Makes sense, yeah.
You start out from the loggers, and then it had to be shipped someplace, all of the finished product.
Mm-hmm.
So now, is it right that no one within 10 miles of Luck ever bought a yo-yo actually at a store?
Why would they?
Yeah.
Well, they had all those nice broken ones they get on the tour, right? So,
I have kind of a funny story about my dad. We had gone to Frederick, and we could put in a stop sign at the main four-way stop there. We were coming back from church, and Dad didn't see the sign and drove right through it, and the cop stopped him and pulled him over and asked for his license, and Dad handed him the license, and he goes, "Are you the Bill Cole from the yo-yo plant?" Dad said, "Yeah," and he goes, "Oh, my son works for you. He really likes it there." And just getting Dad his license back and didn't get a ticket.
So he used his influence there.
Well, he didn't do it. The guy did it. I don't think. But anyway, it was a funny story.
Was that, and maybe some of the historians, Russ and Bob and such, was that the largest employer in the region by far? Probably, huh?
I think Stokely's in Milltown and Frederick had a lot of seasonal employees. I'm not sure how many they had though.
Well, that was a seasonal.
Yeah.
What about when it started to fall apart? I mean, was it slow and gradual, or did it kind of happen all at once? You were
It
nodding.
happened pretty quick. I was only a teenager, but I guess I don't know.
Was there anybody who was everybody caught by surprise when it closed? Pretty close.
I can't remember.
Can't remember.
There was talk about going in different things. There was talk about making going into bowling pins, you know.
Okay.
They're maple, and but it never materialized. There was talk about getting legalizing the factory and making manufacturing bowling pins, but it never turned out.
Another thought too, and that's there again in this article, my dad wrote it in this one article that was where he was interviewed in 1977. They moved the operation from the business part to Chicago, left the manufacturing in Luck. That's when it started falling apart. And my dad says that right there. He said they didn't know what we were doing here and what they were doing in Chicago. We didn't know what they were doing. So that was part of the reason it started falling apart. And Donald Duncan in this article even says that. My dad had said that in 1977, and I thought, maybe you shouldn't have said that. Well, when Donald Duncan says it, he's Donald Jr. said it. That was true.
And when was that move to Chicago?
Oh, golly.
That was in the late 50s?
It was after, oh golly, I was I graduated in 56, and they were still in Luck then. I don't remember what year they moved it out of there.
Okay.
But that's when it started falling apart. One end didn't know what the other end was doing.
Well, and with that falling apart, was it, was there an official closing? I mean, were there any ceremonies or anything? Was there anybody who was there at the very end? Did you just get a notice and say, after the shift, turn in your belly button length there?
It just closed up. They
Just closed up?
Yeah.
Yeah. No real warning at all of sort?
No, well, people talked,
Yeah.
So that's the only way we knew that it was going to be closing. So.
And there were, as it sounds, there were a few folks maybe.
But I was moved from one shift to the other, so then I figured something was going to go on.
Okay.
So.
Okay. And there were folks who were still owed money, maybe?
Yeah.
A lot of them?
Yeah.
My mother-in-law lost the last 2
Yeah.
weeks she didn't get paid.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Dennis was saying, you're still hauling logs in here too.
Oh,
Lumber.
Oh, after.
I can give you my opinion about the whole thing.
Sure.
which may not.
I got a feeling I better stand back, but that's okay.
It may not be accurate, but when you have a product that's been around as long as the yo-yo was around, after a while people become interested in other things, such as the hula hoop, and the sales started to really. This is my opinion. Started to fall off dramatically, and they kept on trying to make yo-yos and trying to market yo-yos when there was no market for it, and consequently they simply ran out of money and didn't pay a lot of people, including myself. But that was okay. It didn't pay a lot of employees. So again, this is my own opinion, and I think that's how it happened.
Another reason why the yo-yo really got popular, like during the Depression, or after the Depression, when money was tight, and they were very, very economical.
Right.
A yo-yo, cheap toy. But then things, got better, the economy better, and people could afford better stuff.
Well, when it closed, was it My guess is it wasn't working 24/7 at the time. They were not around the clock. It had fallen off before that.
Yeah, it kept on diminishing down to nothing.
Right. Okay.
And when they ran out of money, they couldn't pay people, and they had to close.
So this was not like a 600 people out of a job in one day kind of thing. This was,
They kind of went down shift from shift to shift.
Okay.
Why don't you tell us about your mother-in-law's collection that you gave us?
I don't really know too much about it. I just found it in the closet, and it was a box this big, and I thought instead of distributing it to my kids through the United States where they live, I would just leave it all here in Luck. But she must have either taken it out of that truck in the back, or else she slipped one in her pocket, because she had a sample of each kind, I think.
So Ruth brought in a box of almost every kind of yo-yo that they made at Duncan. We've got some of them on display here and more over at the museum, so that's really appreciated.
Thank you. I don't know if I should say, but you talk about the people getting along. She was really enjoyed the group of people that she worked with. And I know when we got married, she was really looking for grandchildren. And up until that time, they must have put money into a pot. The people that were working there were putting money into a pot, and then at the end of the week, they divided it up some way. I suppose someone got to pull out a ticket or whatever, I don't know. But after we got married, she quit putting it that way, because she said, I'll save my money for my first grandchild.
Well, so she was taking. So there were one example. You said pretty much of everything they made.
Well, I think you must have brought in about 50 or 60 yo-yos. Yeah.
It's over 100.
Over 100. Okay.
Well, any other stories? What about some of the stories after the fact? I mean, did any of you folks stay in touch with each other? Was there kind of good memories that you wanted to keep alive? Were there any kind of reunions or anything shortly after, or anything like that? Was there? Did people stay? Or was there a newsletter or anything? Everybody found different jobs.
Yeah, I found different jobs. I went to Pavertac and worked there. So.
Okay. But you had stayed in the area.
Yeah, we've been in this area for many years. So.
Did you stay in touch with any of the folks? Or?
Not really.
Yeah.
I used to stay in touch with Norma Thompson, but she's gone now. But she always wanted me to play on the ball games, you know. So I couldn't do it. I had 5 kids at home. So.
So what did you do at the factory?
I bagged the yo-yos in the machine. And then I did work on putting the tips into the
tops
ones too. I did that for a while.
We had a lady stop by 2 or 3 weeks ago at the museum who couldn't make it in to this. She came from over by McKinley, and she said her job was in charge of the holes. And I said, well, what was that? The cardboard, the plastic bag that the yo-yo was in had, I guess, a cardboard across the top. And she said she would take one out, put it under this machine, press a foot lever, it would punch a hole, and then she would put it in the out box. So she said that wasn't really exciting, but...
What about were there nicknames for the various operations or for some of the things that were going on? I mean, I've heard a few kind of thrown around here, but did there kind of become its own little language in there in some ways? Were you people on various aspects of the line, or yeah?
Well, Ted Anderson was he displayed a lot, and when we retired here in 1930.
I wasn't born yet.
No. No, we retired.
That's another story.
Yeah, we retired in 70.
Okay.
And Ted Anderson gave a display for the Lutheran, for the the kids at Luther Point.
Oh, okay, okay.
And he did the display, and I had never heard of yo-yos before, and I was born in Centuria.
Wow.
And I didn't know that Ted could do all the things that he did. kinds of things, and he displayed it for the kids at Mesa Point.
I think he traveled around.
He traveled, he was one of the demonstrators. What do they call the teams that were going around that would do the tricks and such? Do they have a name for that? 'Cause I know they had the event here just a couple of years ago at the museum where they talked about it. But anything else? So, who's got some other stories? Anything they want to mention? Or oh, back here. She's got a lot of stories, but very few of them are clean, right? Is that right?
No, but this is when we came up, or my dad had come up earlier to start up the yo-yo factory. And he had, folks had bought Chauncey Waitz's house along on Big Butternut Lake. Well, then my dad's twin brother, he left and drove up with myself, my brother. I was 8, my brother was 4, and my cousin. And we knew we were living on a lake, so we were driving around this lake that we couldn't find where we were going. It was night, and somebody joked, said, well, open the window, see if you can smell water, blah, blah, blah. It turned out, ultimately, we were on the wrong lake. We were on Little Butternut. We should have been on Big Butternut. So that was kind of interesting. Another thing, too, when we got there, I remember, why I remember this, maybe because I'm a baker today, but anyway, they had these cookies on the table, my dad did. They called them Sally Lunn cookies, and they were like the shape of a Spam can, and they had this white sugary frosting on them. Does everybody remember those? Mary Jane, was it they were called? Mary Ann? But anyway, and I do have the recipe today, and I've never made them, where you use a Spam can, but there were these cookies on that table, and it's always stayed in my mind.
And they would use the Spam can as like an outline?
No,
or
that's how you would cut them out, because they were the shape of a Spam can. Mary Ann.
Mary Ann.
Or Aunt Sally.
Well, it sounds like there were some great memories as well. Are there, here's, we got another one.
Nothing to do with the manufacturer, but there was always a pile of wood shavings, every day. So my husband worked for Ray Johnson Turkey Farm in the early 60s, and he would load up the shavings, I think every day, and haul the shavings to other turkey farms for bedding. Ray Johnson purchased the shavings, and so that was. And then my husband quit the turkey farm in 1966, and then he went to Land O'Lakes to work. So, but and we burned a lot of the wood too.
Sure. Sounds like very little went to waste.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, which is good. Anybody else? What's the story? Well, we've heard one embarrassing one. Any other embarrassing ones? Your last chance. And believe me, the statute of limitations has expired, so you don't have to worry.
One of the ladies that was here earlier had to leave. It's my neighbor over by Cushing, Jenny Iverson Nelson. She's 98, and she worked here, she said, in the end of the 40s and maybe just into the 50s. And I asked her how much she got paid, and she said, well, it wasn't piecework, it was 50 cents an hour, and her paycheck at the end of the week was $19. So that was probably about 1949 or so.
You look like you wanted to say something there. Uh-oh, no? Anybody else? What about some folks who couldn't be here?
Okay.
Did anyone talk to someone who wishes they could be here and they couldn't for some reason? Or any stories? Are there folks that we wish to be here? Or are there and so maybe some others?
Ask him when the sign went up.
Yeah. What about the sign? The sign that's on this postcard.
Which everybody can have one. If there isn't one on the table, there's some back there.
70,000 yo-yos per day, over 20 million a year by 1947. So
1947.
That's quite a few. And where was this sign? Was this out where the big Lux sign is now? That's where?
It was down at the corner, right? 48 and 35.
Right on the corner of 48 and 35? Okay.
Oh, I was thinking it was one of the...
Yeah, I thought it was closer to Wayne's.
Oh, it was?
Oh.
Yeah, I thought
okay. Well, I tell you, one of the things we should probably do, we're about to, where we said we were going to going to wrap this up, but why don't we, I think if we get a chance to, everybody make sure you take one of the cards with you here as well. Make sure you sign the book, and do we want to make it so we can have some sort of a big photo with her who's here? I think that could be kind of fun as well. Maybe if afterwards we could mingle and find a spot. I don't know if we can all fit in one photo, but we'll have to try. But any other things we'd, oh, yes.
There is, for anyone who wants to stay, there's still plenty of coffee and I think, and lots of bars and that, so, and visit. Feel free.
Wonderful. Well, on behalf of the society and on behalf of the Senior Center, I want to thank everyone for coming out and sharing your memories. And again, we will not hold anyone responsible for anything that was said here today, I don't think. And, but thanks so much. Oh, Bob's got one more thing to add.
These centerpieces, how many, I was thinking, I know there's at least one person here that's over 90 years old. Is there anybody else that's over 90? But Edna definitely should, oh, 2, geez. Couple. Each of you take one of the centerpieces, and then the ones that are on the other tables, whoever's birthday is closest to January 1st, take the one on your table.
There you go. We'll let that battle commence after a while here, but thanks again, everyone, for coming out. Give yourselves a big round of applause. I think this was a great event. My thanks as well to the Luck Historical Society.